Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about action heroes and the cute little kids around them. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alastair.
And in this fortnight's impressively thematically cohesive episode, we're looking at the new Star Wars TV show from Disney+, The Mandalorian, well, relatively new, in which a grizzled bounty hunter meets a young child and starts to reconsider his violent ways. And then we'll be looking also at the recent action movie Extraction from Netflix, starring Chris Hemsworth, in which something quite similar happens. But before all of that, Alastair, what else have you consumed in the last fortnight, and does it involve grizzled action heroes having their lives changed by children?
It does involve grizzled action heroes.
Let's start.
No children, sadly. But no, yeah, I hadn't realised until you mentioned it. That is impressive thematic alignment. It's almost like we planned it in advance.
Guys, we didn't. We just desperately looked for something that was out.
Yeah, something new to cover. So yeah, this is my latest lockdown culture update. The first update is that I finished rewatching all of the Mission Impossible films. Yeah, which is a very enjoyable experience. It's a good franchise. I'd recommend rewatching them all. My review in order is good, bad, surprisingly good, solidly entertaining, underappreciated, excellent film with great late addition to the franchises, and really good for the sixth film in a franchise series that hasn't descended into self-parody, which overall comes out quite good, I think.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen the most recent one, number 6, which I've forgotten the subtitle of. But yeah, they're always meant to be a reliable good time, aren't they?
Yeah, they are very entertaining. Tom Cruise is a good action star. He's always charismatic. Even, when he's doing sort of grizzled undercover secret agent thing. But yeah, the sixth one weirdly is like the most direct sequel they've ever done. It is pretty much a direct sequel to the fifth one. I mean, usually they're quite standalone. When at Christmas, on Christmas Day, in fact, me and my partner, I sort of heavily suggested me and my partner watch the sixth one, and I think she said she found it quite confusing. It was like, because it's very much a direct sequel to the fifth one. And then when we rewatched them in sequence, rewatching the sixth one after watching the sixth one being Mission Impossible Fallout, after watching that, having recently seen Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, she said it made a lot more sense. So I'd recommend actually, and Rogue Nation's one of the best ones actually. It's got some really good. Introduce a new uber baddie played by Sean Harris. Solomon Lane is the character. Yeah, sort of very much the Blofeld of the Mission Impossible universe, which is a good, late addition to the franchise to add a sort of a big baddie and a love interest for Ethan Hunt, a character called Elsa played by Rebecca Hall. They really beef it up in the fifth one, and then carry that momentum on into the sixth one. So that's been enjoyable.
Yeah, it does always seem like it's doing a good job of being a slightly more fun version of Bond, basically, or one of the action franchises, a sort of less self-serious one, but without quite hitting the heights of silliness as some of the Bond films.
Yeah, exactly. It's more sensible than like a Roger Moore Bond film, but it's more casually entertaining than a Daniel Craig Bond film, which sometimes just gets too serious.
I guess, now that the Daniel Craig Bond films are trying to be serious action films, there's kind of space for the Mission Impossible ones to get slightly sillier.
Yeah, or at least just be a kind of a general, like, a film that puts like entertainment above grim broodiness. So yeah, which is like, there is a bit too much sulking in recent Bond films.
Yeah, and based on the trailers for this one that they are currently trying to release, it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon.
No, I think that's very much the mode of the Craig films. If you're stuck with something to do, they're all on Now TV, I think. So yeah, if you've got a Now TV film subscription, I recommend rewatching all the Mission Impossible films. And the other thing I've been doing recently is picking up from my recommendation last week, which was the new series of Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. I've gone back to Altered Carbon, wanting some more cyberpunk after finishing standalone complex.
The original cyberpunk gun porn.
It is still very much a lot of cyberpunk gun porn. But the second series, again, I was surprised myself by how really entertaining it is, because it's the sort of show where it's a cyberpunk show. The premise is people are stored in these sort of chip things, like discs called stacks. Your personality is that, and you can be downloaded into any body, which are called sleeves. That does handily allow them to switch out the actor playing the main character when a much more famous actor becomes available. So yeah, it's still the same main character this series, but they've introduced Anthony Mackie, Falcon from the Avengers films, who is a really good action star and does, again, grizzled, haunted action hero quite well. The other thing, obviously, that works well because this concept is they've introduced a new villain, which is the main character from the past, a previous backed up version of himself when he was still loyal to the bad guys. They can sort of, just download a backed up version of his personality when he was still a villain, put him into an old sleeve, and now he has to fight himself, which is actually surprisingly entertaining to watch.
So is this the season 2 version fighting the season 1 version?
They bring back the original version from before he was spun down prior to Series 1. So it's not Joel Kinnaman playing him, it's the Asian actor who played him in all the flashbacks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he plays this new villain. When I saw them, it was like, that is an interesting way to go. Like, it's the sort of show when, a former villain who becomes a hero can literally fight himself when he was a villain. And it's got lots of, alien weapon systems firing lasers from space. There's an AI being slowly corrupted by a flaw in his system. The main character's AI friend, who's taken on the guise of Edgar Allan Poe, is a good sidekick character. So overall, if you want some grizzled action stars after you've watched The Mandalorian and Extraction, you could either consider the Mission Impossible films with Tom Cruise doing grizzled action stars, or Altered Carbon with Anthony Mackie doing a grizzled action star. Anyway, Nick, what have you been consuming during lockdown?
Well, I've started a couple of things for the last 2 weeks. One of them is Dark, the Netflix series, the German sci-fi series, which I imagine will be getting to in future weeks, because I think Series 3 is now about a month away. I really need to speed up my consumption of that. And I also finally started Season 3 of former podcast review subject Westworld, which finished on UK Sky Atlantic in the last few weeks, so I've just try to watch all 8 episodes before it gets deleted. And yeah, it's good. I like this show. I think I may like this show more than the critical consensus likes this show, to be honest. But yeah, I find its slow unfolding pace and sort of silly plot twists quite entertaining. It keeps moving on, which I enjoy. Like, it hasn't been doing the same long ponderous mystery all series. It has a different long ponderous mystery in each season, and they do mostly get resolved, which I can appreciate, because as we've discussed many times in relation to the way Lost traumatized you as a young man, dragging these things on for years upon years upon years can sometimes go bad. So yeah, the fact that Westworld mostly ties up its plots in each given year is, I think, a better option.
Yeah, there isn't just this ongoing mystery underpinning the whole thing that's never really addressed.
No, they always seem to manage to find new levels of mystery every year, but the mystery that's directly addressed in the storyline seems to, with the caveat that I have not, as of this recording, yet seen the end of Season 3. But yeah, the season's mystery is normally resolved by the end of the story. I very rarely come away thinking, oh shit, what's next? And especially the end of Season 2, they wrapped up most of the plots from the first 2 years, because at the end of Season 2, they finally left the actual Westworld theme park, and in Season 3, we're actually in the outside world.
Oh, right.
Which is a pretty dramatic change. There's lots of future architecture. In some ways, it's quite a shallow future vision. It's a fairly basic sort of everything is shiny and there's lots of AI thing. But I quite enjoy the way it's sort of quite a relatable, visible future. Like, it seems roughly in accordance with the way things are going. It's, there's lots of driverless cars and slightly more fancy tablets and big shiny buildings and a few, obviously, robots, because that's the plot of the show. But it's not dramatically unrecognisable or ridiculously cyberpunky or anything.
Yeah, I remember from when I watched the first episode that the sort of their approach to kind of future architecture was, what if Apple made Bond villain layers?
Yeah, now that we're outside, it's very much what if Apple made most of the world at times. Although, in a very expensive way, It's a very expensive show, but they do seem to have spent most of the money on getting to film in really beautiful buildings to reflect their version of the future. And yeah, they've added Aaron Paul to the cast, so it's fun seeing him play a non-Jesse Pinkman character for a sustained period. Because of the structure of the show, which I mentioned, a lot of it probably hangs on whether they wrap up the story in a way that I don't think is stupid. But they managed it all right for the first 2 years, so yeah, I've seen about half of it. I'm tentatively on board.
Yeah, I'm glad it's at least maintaining the quality to some level. I wasn't so much a fan of the first episode, but I seem to be widely outstepped with the critical consensus, which was that the first series was good. But you're saying that sort of the consensus is that it doesn't maintain that quality.
The consensus seems to be that the first series was good, the second series was less good, and the third series is a bit better again. I personally quite like the second series. But yeah, the people seem to mostly like Season 1. Season 1 was, I think, generally seen as good.
And I'm glad that you're enjoying Dark, which was, I absolutely love that show and recommend it to everyone. I'm looking forward to rewatching the first and second series, probably after I finish Altered Carbon, actually. I'm going to rewatch those two, so I'm all fresh for Series 3.
Yeah, unfortunately, my viewing of Dark seems to have fallen a bit by the wayside in the last week due to the need to watch Extraction and have various late-running Zoom calls, as we all must. But yes, I am aiming to get back to Dark and finish the majority of it, which I still need to watch, because yes, it is very good. It's one of these things which I see people recommending it quite regularly. There seems to definitely be a reliable core of hardcore fans, but it doesn't seem to have quite broken through yet.
No, I've not found a meme group on Facebook for it. That's how you know you've made it. Yeah, but I think having watched Series 1 and 2 shortly before Series 3 will probably, because there are a lot of characters, and obviously because it's a time travel thing, each character can be played by up to 3 or so actors at different stages in their lives. So it's worth familiarising yourself with all the characters, all their relationships, all the ongoing plots, because it is quite a complicated show. So I think I watched Series 1 just before Series 2 came out, which worked out well. So I think you're doing a good thing to do 1 and 2 before Series 3 comes out.
Yeah, I've watched watched 3 episodes, and so far I'm impressed by the sheer volume of characters. I'm glad that they've introduced the time travel quite early as well. That's one thing I'd had sort of spoilt for me, was that there was time travel in it, which I think I've been spoilt for by, the general discourse. And yeah, I watched the first episode, I was a bit sort of, there's no time travel. That isn't going to turn out to be a massive spoiler, is it? But no, it was by the middle of season 2, it was definitely there. So, episode 2, so.
Yeah, I think they just take some time to establish the characters in the present in the first episode, and then in the second episode is when they're like, what is the mysterious door in the wall? Where does that go? So, yeah.
But as I say, I imagine it sounds like we're both planning on watching Dark Season 3. I imagine we'll come back to that in the new stuff review at some point. But yeah. So far so good.
First up this episode, we'll be reviewing The Mandalorian, the new-ish Star Wars show on Disney+. The show follows a Mandalorian bounty hunter who is assigned to capture the kid, that's Baby Yoda to everyone else, and bring him to a former Imperial warlord. Swayed by Baby Yoda's obvious cuteness, the Mandalorian betrays his erstwhile employer and goes on the run. This series was released in America last year, but Disney Plus only launched in the UK in March, pretty much just before we entered lockdown. Coincidence? Maybe. So the series has only just finished out here. We've seen the whole thing. So Nick, what did you think of it?
I mean, yeah, this is pretty fun. It's not experimental or challenging, but is it, strong, regularly paced escapism? Yes. Does it have the slight ring of something created for easy consumption by a certain level of committee? Also yes. But then again, is there a pandemic on, so am I quite happy to just take my gentle escapism? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's basically the Star Wars cowboy thing, merged together and just done pretty straight. But yeah, I could appreciate that. It's got a nice sort of episodic thing, which I quite enjoyed. It's weird, actually, in that I watched this over the course of about a week and a half. I basically watched an episode a day. And it's a rare example of a modern TV show where, honestly, I might have been better off watching it a week apart, because watched bang, 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 bang like that, the episodes in the middle do sometimes risk getting maybe a bit repetitive because of the way they have this sort of quite standard procedural plot where the Mandalorian... I don't think this is really a spoiler. The Mandalorian arrives in a place, has some kind of encounter, and then leaves. It does sometimes risk getting a bit samey. It obviously does have the sort of 2-part conclusion at the end to wrap it up. But yeah, it's fun. It's an enjoyable dose of Star Warsiness without feeling the need to tug on too much continuity porn, which I could appreciate, especially after where we ended up going with Rise of Skywalker. No strings attached fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this show as well. I think I'd even go so far as to hand out the coveted Tight as Fuck award.
I was actually saving that for Extraction, but yeah, this is very much a tight as fuck episode.
Yeah, actually that's a good summary. But I think that there's very little to fault here. Yeah, each episode is tightly written. It's got a good dynamic of the tough grizzled, we're going to be saying grizzled a lot in this episode, Mandalorian, and yeah, obviously looking after the undyingly cute Baby Yoda. Each episode, he arrives in a place, he does a thing, he moves on. I did kind of watch this spread out. Well, I watched the first episode on the day Disney Plus launched in the UK, so I guess I watched the whole thing spread out over about 2 months. So it probably does average out to about 1 a week. I agree with you. That's a good way to watch it, just like kind of dipping in every so often just to see what the Mandalorian's up to. Yeah, there's good pace to it. Yeah, the last 2 episodes built to a satisfying conclusion. I do agree with what you say. This is the whole feel of something that's been designed by a very competent and well-practiced committee to basically be like the ideal sort of serialized TV show. It is, it's not doing anything original, groundbreaking, or experimental, but it's just competently showing up each week, telling an entertaining story, which I can't fault. This is probably the best Star Wars thing we've had in a while. Probably the best Star Wars thing since Rogue One came out. In that, I was slightly disappointed by Rise of the Skywalker. I liked The Last Jedi.
I liked The Last Jedi, but I think it had some flaws in its execution. Like, I think the pacing was a bit weird. We can go back to my review of The Last Jedi to hear me complain about how the chase in The Last Jedi just doesn't feel very urgent. But yeah, I think this is more competent. Like, the one thing they've done here, I guess, it's the launch of one of their single biggest things in years. So obviously Disney have very much hit all the buttons on the Disney competence machine. This is, again, strong corporate entertainment. It's like they've gone, right, we're going to do Star Wars, we're going to put this cowboy sheen on it to avoid it feeling too much like a sort of, do you like Star Wars? Here's some more exercise. It has something resembling an identity. You know, there's new tropes here that aren't just more Star Wars, and then they've just absolutely fed it through the competence machine. And yeah, it's nice, it's well made, it's charming in the right places, the characters have character.
Which is, just to go with that, it's actually, considering that it's quite impressive that the Mandalorian has so much personality, considering he wears a suit and has an expressionless face.
Yeah, I like how even though he's a character whose face doesn't really need to appear, he's still played by incredibly good-looking and charismatic man Pedro Pascal, aka Oberyn Martell from Game of Thrones.
Yeah, but again, and he does a good job of acting, mainly with the voice and the sort of physicality of the role, despite the fact that you don't see his face, which must have been challenging as an actor. I think one of the other things that made this show really work compared to previous Star Wars things is that it was really great to have a Star Wars story with minimal Jedi bollocks. It was like, which is what I really liked about going back to the original trilogy. Like, yeah, obviously Darth Vader's cool and the lightsaber fights are good, but like it's like the space battles and chases and the roller coasterness of Star Wars is what I enjoy the most. Certain reprehensible corners of the internet are trying as hard as possible to redeem the prequel trilogies because of their hatred of the new ones, but the prequel trilogies are the worst for just over bloated, endless Jedi sort of semi-mystical bollocks, which doesn't really make sense and is actually quite tedious.
Oh, yeah, I mean those corners of the internet tend to want sort of a level of fan indulgence. They seem to think you should be bending everything towards the hardcore fans. And the good thing at The Mandalorian is, although yes, it does give you sort of fairly straightforward action, which is on some level liked by those people, it's also not trying to do the secret origin of a character you've never heard of. There's no continuity porn here.
Yeah, exactly. They're all new characters. The Force, I think, isn't mentioned actually at all. Baby Yoda uses the Force several times, but people are just kind of confused by it, and people say, I've heard stories about sorcerers who can move things with their mind. It's good. It's like, it's nice that it's kind of in the background. Really goes to show that the Star Wars universe is not all about the Jedi. The Jedi are an elite plot. It's basically like the kind of the Westminster machinations. This is, what's going on in small town Star Wars, miles away from like the central politics where Jedi stuff is irrelevant, which is really nice to see that side of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are ways this could go wrong in terms of continuity porn. Like at some point they may have to go into exactly what Baby Yoda is, or, take Baby Yoda back to his people or something. And I don't know how excited I am for the secret origins of the Yoda species or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, this season by itself does a good job of giving you Star Warsiness and a few nice recognisable bits without wanking off the lightsaber of continuity. So good. Well,
that's a great line.
If ever wants to try wanking off a lightsaber, then make sure you get a real one and tell me how it goes.
Carterized. I've honestly forgotten what I was going to say.
That's the power of strong imagery. Continue.
Yeah, you were going back to Baby Yoda. What I was surprised by is the thing in this show is that even though everyone calls it Baby Yoda, it isn't Yoda when Yoda was young, because this is set after Return of the Jedi and Yoda's death. I mean, it could be a reincarnation, but I don't think that's where they're going. But hopefully they avoid any, again, unnecessarily fan wanking over the origin of Baby Yoda. But I've got to say, Baby Yoda is so cute.
Oh yeah, Baby Yoda's adorable, fair enough.
Again, like the product of the Disney maximum cuteness optimization engine, I'm sure. They've had years of designing characters to make toys aimed at appealing to 6-year-olds. And the 6-year-old in me still thinks Baby Yoda is undeniably cute.
Yeah, I mean, I've, as I'm sure I've said during most previous Star Wars reviews, I did grow up on Star Wars to the same degree, but I mostly come to it as an adult. But yeah, I can still see that little alien is cute. Yeah,
me and my girlfriend would pretty much every time Baby Yoda came on screen go, "Oh, Baby Yoda."
Yeah, it's hard not to be honest. I mean, in terms of continuity porn, I have seen people wonder if this is a sort of attempt to give people a Boba Fett series without actually doing it, but I don't know. Just because Boba Fett wears Mandalorian armor, doesn't he, or very similar armor? Yeah,
well, I think again we can blame the prequels for the ruining Boba Fett by introducing the fact that he's Australian and he has a dad, which kind of ruins the character a bit. And he's also the blue point for the stormtroopers for some reason. I don't know. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, it does make some sense, but it is annoying and irrelevant. But they digged into corner of the Star Wars universe, which I believe is explored in some of the spin-off books, the Mandalorians, who are a warrior religion.
Yeah, that was the other part, but actually, the one thing that I did think as I watched it is like, okay, am I meant to know what a Mandalorian is and what they believe and why they believe it? Or is this like a mystery that the show is going to unfold before my dazzled eyes? Because I've not heard of a Mandalorian before they started promoting this show at me. So
I think it's definitely the latter. I mean, as someone who, when I was young, played a lot of Star Wars video games, read a lot of Star Wars spin-off books, and engaged in Star Wars a lot as possible, even I knew there's a group called the Mandalorians who wear cool armor and are sort of warrior people, but even I didn't really know what they is. And there are books that go into them. I mean, there's a lot of Star Wars books and comics and things like that. And I don't know if they've picked up some piece of continuity from somewhere that exists in the wider Star Wars canon, or if things like The Way, which is the creed that the Mandalorians follow, is something they've invented to the show. I'm not enough of a Star Wars geek to know that, but I get the feeling, and I could be wrong, that most of this is new continuity. The Mandalorians are definitely not something they've invented for the show, but I think most of their creed and culture is something they've come up with. And certainly the show is good at packaging this knowledge in an accessible way. I didn't feel confused at any point by not knowing really what a Mandalorian is. And I liked how they went into the backstory of the main character and the culture of the Mandalorians and who they were, which was interesting and something new. But it didn't really overpower the show. It was very much in the background, something they explored. They fed it to you in bits, but it didn't like take over the show a way that like kind of the internal politics of the Jedi just seemed to consume the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah, it was a good way of making it sort of interesting and mysterious. And as I say, I came away sort of wanting to know more. I was just vaguely unsure if I was meant to already know more. But yeah, I hope they will dig a bit more into that in season 2. Maybe.
Yeah.
I liked how instead of bringing in like old characters and, as I say, doing continuity plugs, they just used a wide range of it's them type actors. Like the number of people I vaguely recognise who show up in this show, both playing characters and voicing droids, was quite impressive.
Yeah. I think the cast was phenomenal. Some excellent people they got in for this. Slightly covert ones like Taika Waititi doing the IG-11 droid was cool, and Richie Ayoade was a droid in one episode as well.
Yeah, and Giancarlo Esposito turning up as a villain towards the end.
That guy just does villains, but he does villains so well.
Yeah, well, he did, and this is true, play a vaguely sympathetic king in Once Upon a Time. And Ming-Na Wen playing the bounty target in the episode where they have to sort of travel across the deserts. I hope she'll be back, because she's very good at playing this sort of grizzled action roles. She's Agent May in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that show's about to end, so she's probably got some free time. Yeah,
I think because each episode's quite episodic and usually focuses around one or so prominent guest star, then I think they're setting up these characters to reappear in the next series, the ones that are still alive. I think.
Yeah, wasn't there a bit with the Ming-Na Wen character? She's lying dead in the desert, and someone walks up to her body ominously, suggesting they're gonna, I don't know, heal her or turn her into a Frankenstein or something.
Yeah, so I think that was, definitely a kind of like this character return. And so will, I think, several other characters. Some other great ones I enjoyed is Carl Weathers from the Predator films, well, from the first Predator film, as the kind of head of the Guild of Bounty Hunters. Yeah, he was excellent. And bizarrely, Werner Hertzog, who I mainly know as a sort of arty documentary maker. I know he does act and he does direct fiction as well. In general, all-round sort of art house darling. He turned up playing the Imperial agent who hires the Mandalorian in the first episode. I thought that was, every time he came on screen, I was just like, I just can't get over that Werner Hertzog is in Star Wars. I mean, could not predict that.
As you age into this sort of elder statesman, serious director type position, there are two ways you could really go. There's the Martin Scorsese moaning about Marvel films thing, or there's the Werner Herzog, I'm going to leverage my position into a gig in Star Wars because fuck it.
Yeah. No, he was very good.
If that's what makes him happy, then absolutely go for it, Werner Herzog. I'm with you.
No, it was excellent, yeah. Yeah, the casting was phenomenal. And as we said, Pedro Pascal is obviously great in the title role. I mean, they've got some phenomenal people behind it. A lot of actors going into directing for this, like Jon Favreau.
He's pretty credible as a director at this point, isn't he? I mean, he
did Iron Man.
The first two Iron Man films.
Yeah.
He did, in his way, kind of established a tone for the MCU.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's good at directing. He also directed Chef. Yeah, a good art house film, or sort of independent film. So yeah, he's got credit. And also Bryce Dallas Howard, who obviously primarily known as an actress, has also directed some episodes, I think. And Taika Waititi directed the final episode as well.
Yeah, no, as I say, they've very much got a sort of a wide range of talent I've heard of, rather than using Star Wars characters I've heard of, and I'm in favour of that.
Yeah.
There is an extent to which this is kind of a little shallow and unchallenging, but on the other hand, you have to say when covering Star Wars, it is Star Wars. It ultimately is a fun adventure show aims to be accessible for like 10 to 12-year-olds, and yeah, it's just enjoyable. I enjoyed it when it was on, and I was sad when it was over.
Yeah, I thought it was just very well executed and very well put together. Yeah, it's just nice to see something done well.
If you want my token complaints, I thought it dragged very slightly in the penultimate episode, but it soon picked back up again, so whatever.
Yeah, the last episode was good, and there was an interesting setup for the next series. The music was great as well. I don't really know a lot about film and TV music, but I did always thinking like the bits of incidental music they had are really atmospheric. Yeah, which I guess just drives more to the overall point of this is, Disney competence machine firing on all cylinders, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Next up, in this episode, we will be reviewing Extraction, a new Netflix film starring Chris Hemsworth as Tyler Rake, a mercenary who's hired to rescue Ovi, the son of an Indian drug lord who's been captured by a Bangladeshi drug lord. However, after rescuing Ovi, Tyler is betrayed by the man who hired him and must go on the run in Dhaka with a price on his head whilst being pursued by 2 sets of goons and being haunted by a tragic backstory. We've seen this film. Nick, what did you think of it?
Having ragged a bit on Mandalorian for being somewhat unadventurous, this film is kind of both a bit more and a bit less, in that it's in a lot of ways a very generic gun tough guy film, but on the other hand I guess these sort of films aren't quite as much of a mainstream surefire win as they were decades ago. So yeah, once again this is a pretty competent hardcore action film, focusing very heavily on the zippy fighting and killing, like much more so than The Mandalorian. Like, the focus here is very much on the violence. There's just about a big enough side order of emotion to stop it feeling hollow. But yeah, the sheer level of violence does mean that, yeah, you have to very much want cathartic violence to go for this film. The emotional bits just about work, but to get to them you do have to go through quite a lot of lengthy scenes of Chris Hemsworth fucking up a lot of dudes. Like...
I mean, that is the film in a nutshell. Like, Chris Hemsworth fucks up some dudes in Bangladesh.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth fucks up a lot of dudes in order to save a cute kid from being murdered. That's basically it. The film just about gives it enough emotional grounding that his motivation for saving the kid and the way it all plays out feels a bit sort of sad. But it is mostly very much Hemsworth fucking up dudes to save a cute kid. With maybe, as I've said before, I've never pretended to be the best person at spotting this stuff, but even I did start to wonder after the 4,000th minute of Chris Hemsworth fucking up dudes in vast quantities. That white guy sure is murdering a huge amount of brown people.
Yeah.
Like, he's the only white person in this film, or at least one of very few white people with a major role in this film, and it's just about him killing everybody else. Is this cool? Is this cool? Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, it's funny because it's so apt. He just wreaks this, like unreal, like, cavalcade of destruction, like, right across Dhaka. And just, it is like, just dudes just pouring in from everywhere with guns, and like, Chris Hemsworth's got, like, at one point, like, a grenade launcher under one arm and like a machine gun in the other, and he's just like killing everyone. It is, yeah, I mean, for a film that actually starts like trying to be serious about like there's like a grounded, realistic film like about actual army guys, it just become like carnage by the end.
Yeah, I watched the movie Bob Shipman review of this, and he did at one point remark that it felt a lot like what a film version of Call of Duty might feel like. And yeah, there's definitely a certain video game-itude to this film. Yeah. And also, even though it's a more air quotes realistic action genre and does just about stay within the bounds of physics, you know, you can sort of feel the vague echoes of the superhero genre, partly because Hemsworth is just still a massive guy and looks like a superhero, and partly because, I don't know, I mean, I think the Russo brothers are involved somehow. I don't think they actually directed it, but they
produced
somewhere.
It, yeah.
And it's, you know, the film is in some ways vaguely Marvel adjacent, and there is a certain superhero-itude to the sheer number of dudes Hemsworth is able to fuck up just by himself. But yeah, if you're here for the cathartic action, there's a lot of it, and it's pretty cathartic, you know, you can get pretty into, like, yeah, get him. But yeah, the plot is serviceable but a bit thin, and yes, it probably is at least a little bit problematic in terms of, again, the sheer white saviourness of Chris Hemsworth just arriving in Dakar and murdering this pile of people.
Yeah, it is.
So there we go, Extraction. It's old school in a number of ways.
Yeah. I mean, this film's approach to characterization is best summed up by how it introduces the Chris Hemsworth. He's really the only character of any substance in the film, in that he wakes up after sleeping in the outback, drinks some beer, then jumps off a 30-foot cliff and sits at the bottom of a lake for a while. I mean, that is kind of like straight up, so that's your introduction to the character. This, you know, like, Tyler Rake's a man's man. He wakes up, he drinks a beer, he jumps in the lake.
He feels sad for a bit.
Yeah. But considering the, shall we say, straight up nature of this film, I actually found it really entertaining. Yeah, obviously it is just like what kind of one never ending roller coaster of carnage, but it is really like entertaining. It's really tense in places. The plot is very tight, it's focused, the action scenes are good, there's a real like visual flair to it. I just think, like, again, as someone who grew up watching films in the 90s, you know, I feel like I've seen almost like every different type of action scene possible at this point. You know, I've seen every different way that a muscly white dude can fuck up a bunch of dudes. And there is something about this film that it's not like radically breaking new ground the way that, I don't know, for example, like when people discovered Hong Kong action movies and they were like, well, things can be like different, but there is it's got a sense of visual flair, appeal, it's entertaining, something intangible try to put my hand on, but basically it's very watchable.
Yeah, it is very watchable. It is very entertaining. It's some sort of weird marriage between the sort of bored identity, sort of shaky cam, slightly more in the moment style of filming, combines with the sort of action hero fucking up dudes area, somehow working together to produce something that seems a little bit different.
Yeah.
And yeah, for all that it probably is mildly problematic, it does try and get into the sort of local Dakar politics and who exactly all the different factions of people involved with the Hemsworth character are. There's a bit of a sort of Homeland-esque attempt to provide some characterization and some moral ambiguity. A couple of characters other than Hemsworth do get to have some kind of character journey. It's not just him.
Yeah.
It's mostly him, but a couple of others do get a bit.
Yeah, the kid who he rescues goes on a journey of discovering himself and becoming braver. And it's got a nice visual metaphor. It starts, obviously, with Chris Hemsworth jumping in a lake and sitting at the bottom, and it ends with the kid jumping off a diving board and sitting at the bottom of a pool, showing the kid's grown into the confidence that he sort of admires in the Tyler character, which was a nice sort of light touch of characterization for a film that is not a deep dive into character.
The character Sarge, played by Vandeep Huda, is also, he has a few good moments. He has a nice sort of tragic emotional journey, which I thought works pretty well, and it was nice to see someone other than Chris Hemsworth getting a few big moments.
Yeah.
There's a few interesting bits in this film for the Hemsworthologists out there. He gets to actually play Australian, rather than having to pretend to be either American or sort of weird Shakespearean English. And if you've been following the trajectory of the Hemsworth over the last few years, he definitely seems to be sort of swinging into comedy for a lot of his roles. So this is a bit of a swing back towards serious action, I guess, to remind us that he can still do that, even if a lot of his roles over the last few years have skewed a little bit silly. He's
done a few army movies, I think, recently. I mean, obviously he's done into kind of stuff like Men in Black. International is obviously trying to capitalise on the kind of the humour and stuff that he's doing, and the comedy acting he's doing for the Thor films. But yeah, things like, I think 12 Strong was like an army film that he was in. He's got a sort of sub-brand of Chris Hemsworth does army guys, which this very much fits into. By scanning down his IMDb page, I can see that Extraction 2 has been greenlit.
Starring
Chris Hemsworth. As Tyler Rigg. Well, I don't know. It just says he's down for the casting of Extraction 2, according to IMDb, which is never wrong.
Yeah, I'm just aware that he did his silly role in Ghostbusters, and his portrayal of Thor in his last 2 or 3 movies has definitely swung towards comedy. Yeah. Like the entirely comic subplot involving Thor in Endgame, where he gets depressed and puts on weight. I don't know, like the apocryphal story was that that was something Hemsworth wanted. He requested that his plot be a bit more comical rather than just sad depression.
Yeah.
It seems like he's been skewing comedy in the last 2 or 3 years, so it's interesting to see him back in straight action.
I guess it shows his range, and he does have range in a leading man. It's interesting to say because this film does feel very much like it could have been made in the 90s, like during like the heyday of the Muscle Man action movies. I can really imagine this film being made in the 90s, starring Mel Gibson. It's got that real vibe to it, and it's not ironic or self-conscious or in the way that, say, like a lot of the Marvel films are. I do not see like the hand of Joss Whedon on this anywhere, which is, it's good that it's different. It's sort of pleasingly retro.
It's true. There is nothing resembling a joke here.
No, there is very little. Yeah, and it is something like, it does feel like something from a previous year, just with a modern star. But those actors from those period, like, Mel Gibson, Arnie, Stallone, the sort of people who would have starred in this movie had it been made sort of 20, 30 years ago. But they all did try the hand at comedy at one point to show their range, to show they weren't just muscly people who fucked up dudes in films. So I could see how Hemsworth's on a similar career trajectory in that, he's established himself as a leading man, action star, bankable box office for your go-to action, superhero and sci-fi franchises. But he wants to show that he's more than that. He's got range, he can do comedy.
Except due to the rise of like snarky postmodernism, the main thing you do now is sort of snarky action. And to show your range, you also sometimes do slightly more serious non-snarky action. Whereas in the old days, it might have been the other way around.
Yeah, I always thought that though with the Thor characters and the sense of humour was a little less on the irony, more on the buffoonery.
It's true. Thor rarely gets to be snarky, does he? Most of the joke with Thor is that he's a sort of well-meaning lunkhead.
Yeah, and obviously there's a sense of their ironically sending up the action movie, the hyper-competent action superstar. They're sort of sending it up by him being a bit dense or a bit silly, which is, but again, there's lots of Arnie movies, like True Romance, been a favourite of mine. Underappreciated, hilarious Arnie action movie in which Arnie plays like a super spy action star, but also just constantly just making silly mistakes and things going slightly wrong. Yeah, there's something in the Hemsworth, I guess it's the way he's sending up his persona and, his sort of his physicality to a degree. The kind of humour is more like Stark gets the sarcastic self-aware lines. Thor gets to be a bit of a knucklehead sometimes. But it's very much weird how that is. He is very much like following a career of a star from the past. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's interesting because it's just something that seems to have gone out of fashion. This kind of muscle man guy who then tries to hand at comedy. I guess the classics never go out of style.
I mean, I like Chris Hemsworth. I think he has a lot of charm, and this is quite an underwritten role, and I think it is. But maybe underwritten's a bit harsh. I don't know, but it's not a
sparsely written.
It's a sparsely written role. It's not a super deep role, and I think Hemsworth does do a lot to make it work. I don't know if he's gonna end up doing like deep, sensitive Oscar bait character study movies. Like maybe in the future we'll see Robert Downey Jr. go and do some long, pretentious character study movie to prove that he's matured into a thoughtful middle-aged actor. Whereas I don't know if that's something Hemsworth's going to end up doing.
That's the Tom Cruise career arc, action superstar into no, I'm serious actor, as opposed to the Arnie of action star into no, I'm lighthearted and can be funny. Yeah, you're right. Is that this film? It's a sparsely written character, but Chris Hemsworth brings it to life. I mean, this film is a lot of Hemsworth charm. If you like watching Chris Hemsworth and think he's an entertaining star, he is basically almost the entirety of this film. So, but I do find him very entertaining. So that's one of the reasons why I liked it.
Well, yeah, it's a different branch of it here, in that he's still carrying it without being able to just goof around like he does in a lot of his recent Thor stuff. I mean, I'm sure if you are an advanced level Hemsworthologist, you've probably watched this weeks ago.
Yeah, it's got some great action scenes. It's got the prerequisite big action scene that's one long shot, or at least it's edited together to appear to be one long shot. Like Atomic Blonde did that. The Daredevil TV show did a few of those as well, the kind of big fight sequence. It's got that as well, which is good. It's got some generally quite unpleasant bits with like involving forks going through people's eyes and things like that, and people being thrown off roofs that are actually genuinely unpleasant.
There's some strong moments of sudden cringing away from the telly when something goes through someone.
Yeah, there's sort of like that gritty sort of up-close action, very much reminded me of The Raid. It's a film, sort of post-Raid school of action filmmaking, but yeah, in a very entertaining way. So again, if you're looking for something to do during lockdown and something that's definitely not taxing on the brain but is very entertaining, I think we can recommend Extraction.
Yeah, I mean it's a different kind of escapism in a way, but it's less forget your worries by escaping into a world of gleeful fun, and more forget your worries because it's so like fast and intense. But both of them will distract you. Okay, and that was Moderate Fantasy Violence. Thank you for coming with us through this inspirational journey. If you've enjoyed the show, you can get more Moderate Fantasy Violence related content from our website, located aptly enough at moderatefantasyviolence.com, where there are articles, past episodes, and deleted scenes from the older episodes. And if you really enjoyed the show, why not leave us a review on your podcast provider of choice? And you can also get the show from Spotify now.
You can also find us on Twitter, where we are at MFV Podcast, or you can follow us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. You can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Alastair J.R. Ball, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
Yep, and you can find more from me on Twitter at NickMB, or you can find my writing and creative pursuits at nickbryan.com. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with episode 112, in which we'll be covering the new Netflix show Space Force, starring Steve Carell, and we'll be taking a look at the first volume of Family Tree, a new Image horror series from Jeff Lemire and Phil Hester. Okay, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I like The Last Jedi, but I think it had some fluctuation. Hang on.